everybody. I'm Ricki, and I'm just thrilled to be here. I was looking around when I came in, and I was saying to one of the organizers, like, how amazing is it that we have this kind of response to a gluten-free event in Toronto? If I think back just a few years, this just would not have happened. So I am thrilled to see the kind of turnout we have today, and everyone here who's interested in gluten-free and allergen-friendly. I just think it's terrific, and I am absolutely delighted to be part of this. So I'm going to start by just introducing myself a little bit to you, so in terms of who I am and what you can expect. So my name is Ricki, and I'm a registered holistic nutritionist, and I'm also a food blogger. I blog at rickiheller.com, easy to remember, where I post recipes that are free of gluten, eggs, dairy, and refined sugars. So I don't have any of those things. I follow a vegan diet, and there are no animal products in my recipes. You'll find about 600 recipes for all kinds of foods there. So how I got involved in this, I'm also a writer and a cookbook author. And I have to just say, this is my latest cookbook, Naturally Sweet and Gluten-free, 100 allergy-friendly vegan desserts. And I'm so excited because the book comes out on Monday in stores across North America. So it's available online, but it won't be in stores till Monday. So this is kind of a sneak peek that I brought with me today, and I'll be at the table later if anyone has any questions about cooking or ingredients or the cookbook. But what I'm going to talk about for the rest of my time is really coming to deal with multiple food intolerances or allergies, and also some tips and tricks that we can do. I've been gluten-free for 13 years, and that's kind of connected to the fact that I was on an anti-candida diet. So I was diagnosed with candida-related complex, which is an overgrowth of yeast in the body. I don't know if people are familiar with that. But everybody has candida, which is a kind of yeast in their body all the time, and normally it lives in harmony with everything else in your digestive tract. That you have positive or probiotics, you have other organisms, and there's this lovely balance that happens. But if something triggers an imbalance for whatever reason, some of the triggers can be being on antibiotics for a long time, eating too many sugary foods, or being on the pill. So I basically had all of the risk factors. And in a case like that, candida is kind of an opportunist. It likes to swoop in, it likes to take the limelight away from everything else. It's kind of like the Paris Hilton of microorganisms in your gut, right? When candida sees an opening, it wants to be the star, and it will just multiply and cause all kinds of problems for you. So you can have the regular sort of expected symptoms like yeast infections, but also things like foggy thinking, digestive issues, which I had. I was diagnosed with IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome, long before I was diagnosed with candida. Things like sinus infections, which I also had. So when I was diagnosed with candida, I was put on an extremely restrictive diet with no meat, no eggs, no dairy, no sugars at all. I wasn't allowed fruit initially, no alcohol, no moldy foods like mushrooms or blue cheese or things like that, plus a whole bunch of other things that I just couldn't eat. And so as you can imagine, there was a little bit of an adjustment period. And over the years, I did learn how to thrive this way and eat this way. And I want to share with you some of the things that I learned throughout the years to help me adjust, so that now I feel as if I am not living a deprived or restrictive life at all. What I love to do is to try to take the mystery out of eating with food allergies, so that people will feel that they have the power to create any kind of dish they want, and it's going to be just as delicious as the conventional version, so that there are no apologies necessary. You don't have to make excuses for your food. It's not a special or restricted food, it's just a delicious food, and you can feel happy serving that to other people. So in my house now, when I cook or when I invite friends over, I just serve them what I'm making. I don't tell them, oh, this is gluten-free, this is egg-free, whatever. I just serve it to them, and then I watch them eat it and enjoy it. And I think that's the ultimate goal, to feel like what you're eating is delicious in its own right and doesn't require any kind of apology. So what I want to do is go to the point where you're diagnosed and you're looking for some answers or how you're going to deal with this kind of diagnosis. if suddenly your world changes and all the things you've been eating are off the table, or at least it feels like all the things you've been eating are off the table. So now what? I'll be looking at some key tips and tricks and strategies that I have developed over the years. And I want to look at 3 realms of sort of our daily lives that I think encompass basically everything that we do. So the first one is what I'm going to call the personal realm, and that's really what goes on in here. The personal realm is your ideas, your thoughts, your values, your attitudes, that kind of thing. The private realm, that's within your own space. So your home really is what I'd be looking at there. How do you deal with this kind of issue in your house, with your spouse, or that's a little poem, your house with your spouse, with your family, your kids, and so on. And then finally, the public realm, outside with other people. What happens when you go to friends' houses? What happens when you go to restaurants? What happens when you go traveling and go on vacation? How can you ensure that you can eat foods that are safe for you and that you don't have to worry about what you're putting in your mouth? So I'm going to start with the personal realm, and I'm saying it's all about you. It's your attitude. And I think if I had to pick one aspect that to me is the most important thing to change when you're diagnosed, that would be your attitude. How you feel about the fact that you are now being a different diet. And I think that can make all the difference in the world. My dad, I was just talking to somebody over there about the fact that my dad came over from Poland in the 50s or whenever it was. And when he first moved here, he decided that he was going to no longer speak Polish because he was now living in Canada. And although he moved to Montreal, I guess in those days it was primarily English. So he decided he was going to speak English because that was the language of his country. And he just kind of left the Polish behind. And for me, similarly, when I was in grade 7, I went to a French immersion school in Montreal, even though I'm from an Anglophone family. And I remember that the very first day, they laid down the law. We were not allowed to speak English at all on school property during the school day. And if we were caught speaking English, we were fined 5 cents, which for a 13-year-old back then was actually quite a lot. But the point is, we left the English behind. And what I learned to do was to stop translating in my head from English to French. I embraced the French, and I thought like someone who spoke French. And I think you have to draw that parallel between the learning a new language and your whole new culinary language. So it doesn't serve anybody to approach your food with the attitude, well, I want to recreate exactly wheat bread, Wonder Bread, or whatever it is. I want to recreate Dunkin' Donuts and have it be exactly the same. It's not going to be exactly the same. But that's not to say it cannot be absolutely equally as delicious. So I would encourage you to embrace the new world of gluten-free, egg-free, dairy-free, whatever it may be for you. And you'll find that it can be just as satisfying and just as delicious. And I think that's one great way to sort of put the past behind you. I teach a literature course at Seneca College, because my PhD is actually in modern American literature. And it's called Illness and Health in Modern Writing. And one of the authors we look at is Michael J. Fox. People are familiar with the Canadian actor. I adore Michael J. Fox, as do so many other hundreds of thousands of people. Anyway, he has young onset Parkinson's disease. And now, he's very open about it, now when he's on screen, you can really see that he has Parkinson's disease. And in his book, which is called Lucky Man, and I would highly recommend anyone read it, it's a memoir about his disease and coming to terms with it, he says right at the beginning that if the powers that be above, whether God or Allah or Buddha, whomever, if they said to him, you know, Michael, you can go back to the way you were before you were diagnosed with Parkinson's disease is gone, he said, no, I wouldn't do it. Because he feels that his disease is a gift to him. And I remember the first time I read that book, and I thought, yeah, right. You would say, let me still have Parkinson's disease. But I think, having dealt with Candida for 13 years now, I have a little bit of an idea of what he meant, because I know that in a way my Candida was a gift for me. If I had not come down with that condition. And let me tell you, anyone who's been on the Candida diet is extremely restricted, and it's no fun to have Candida. You really feel like crap all the time. But if I hadn't come down with that condition, I would never have changed my diet. I'm pretty sure about that. I would have continued to eat your standard American diet, junk food, garbage food, and I would have probably never been as healthy as I even am now. So I think in some way that teaches you when you accept that new situation, you can actually go beyond where you were before, and it really can be something great in your life. So that's just to reiterate that attitude is so, so important. I remember it with this lovely little joke I'm going to share. It's the light bulb joke you may have heard. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? This one, but the light bulb really has to want to change. So I would advise you to take that approach. Once you embrace and accept that change, everything will be different and everything will be better. So really, attitude is so, so important. Also, that will allow you to think of this new realm as an adventure. I find it really ironic that for me, it took a supposedly restricted diet before I broadened my culinary horizons, right? So what I eat now is so much more varied, and I eat so many more different foods than what I ate before. When I was eating meat, and when I was eating Pringles, and when I was eating Twinkies, or whatever, the equivalent and all those things, Kraft dinner, I had my few favorites that I ate over and over and over. But when all those things went away, I had to start trying out different foods. And so now, I eat my 5 to 8 vegetables and fruits a day. I've tried kale, I've tried dandelion greens, I've tried quinoa grain, I've tried teff grain, all these wonderful gluten-free grains that I didn't even know existed before. And so to me that's really exciting, and I feel like my diet now is so much more interesting than it was before. So it really, really is a culinary adventure, and one that I would advise you to really just embrace, because it's great. Having said that, and change always does require some adaptation. So I wouldn't expect to get used to eating this way overnight. I mean, it did take me a while to play around with the different grains and the different flours. I'm at the point now where, with this book, I have my own all-purpose gluten-free flour mix that I created that can be used one-for-one instead of wheat flour. It took me a few years to get there, right? So, okay. Moving to how do you make that transition, and how can you be sure that what you're eating is safe? I'm going to start with the private realm, which is your home space. So what I call Plan A, share and share alike. There are 2 ways that you can set up your home if you find that someone in it is diagnosed with either celiac disease or food allergies. And Plan A is the one I would actually recommend. And I would also say, Plan A, if someone has an allergy to which they have an anaphylactic reaction, there really should be no negotiation. Everyone in the house needs to eat that same diet. So if someone has celiac disease and you have a really accommodating family and they're happy to try new things, and they say we're all going to eat gluten-free, that is fantastic. But if someone has an allergy to shrimp or peanuts or whatever it is, and they're going to die if they eat that allergen, I don't think it's worth it for the rest of the family to try to have that food in the house when accidentally the person who has the allergy could ingest it or be exposed to it and have a catastrophic reaction. So my advice would be, in a case like that, if someone's allergic to peanuts, no peanuts in the house. And if you're the person in the house who can eat those peanuts, have them at work. And then wash your hands and then brush your teeth before you go home. Because you never know what can be transferred to the person who has the allergy. So if everybody's going to eat the same way in the house, that's just the easiest way to do it. But even in that situation, the first thing you want to do is remove and replace all offending foods, obviously. Anything that has that ingredient in it has to go out of the house. So if it's gluten, you might be surprised some of the places where gluten hides. Ketchup, I was really surprised. Frozen French fries are often coated in wheat flour so that they're crispier. When I go to restaurants now, I have to ask them, are your fries coated in flour? And often they are. Things like soy sauce we know has wheat in it, but anything that has that offensive ingredient, you want to remove it. You also want to think about anything that has a porous surface in the house that can absorb that allergen. So if you have plastic cutting boards or plastic bowls, other porous materials. Depending on how sensitive the person is, you want to get rid of those. You know, I have a friend who has celiac disease, and she has a reaction to 2 parts per million of gluten. The government standard is 20 parts per million. They say anything below 20 parts per million is acceptable for someone with celiac, but she reacts to only 2 parts per million. So in a case like that, you know, I have a food processor I use every day. It's got a plastic bowl. You can wash it in the dishwasher and probably it will be okay, but you know what? For $39, I'll go buy a new plastic bowl for my family member who has celiac disease, right? I'll throw away my plastic baking bowls and my plastic measuring spoons, and I'll just buy new ones because I don't want to take a chance in a case like that. So the utensils as well, spoons and things like that. The second alternative is if people in the home are not willing to all eat the same thing. So for instance, in my house, I follow a vegan diet, I follow a gluten-free diet. My husband is neither gluten-free nor vegan. In our case, I was not diagnosed with celiac disease, so I'm not going to be sick for 6 days if I ingest gluten. I'm going to have a bit of an upset tummy and maybe for an afternoon or something. You know, if I eat eggs, I'm not allergic to eggs, it's my choice not to eat them. But if I had an allergy, I think I would be a little more insistent in my house. But if someone has celiac disease, I have friends where just let's say the eldest son has celiac disease and nobody else in the family has to avoid gluten. So that what they do is the sharing your home space that I call alone and yet together. They have basically separate utensils and things for everybody. So don't forget, you know, if you have a toaster that's been used for regular wheat bread, bagels, whatever, the person who can't eat gluten cannot use that toaster. It's extremely difficult to get everything out of that. So things like a grill, if you're going to be grilling on it. In our house, when we first bought our indoor grill, my husband was all excited. He got to grill meat inside now, and he went and he grilled himself a steak. And of course, we washed the grill. And then it was about 2 weeks later, I decided I wanted to grill some vegetables for my dinner, and I made my eggplant. And with the first spoonful, I knew there was still some vestige of meat on that grill because it tasted like steak, even though it had been washed and had been sitting there for 2 weeks. So in a case like that, I was able to taste it, but you may have molecules of an offending food left on a grill, especially if it's Teflon, because that is a porous material. You may have molecules left on a utensil or a small appliance, and you won't even be able to taste it. And the person who has the allergy is going to be affected by that. So again, I would say, you know, how much is a toaster? $29? We have 2 toasters. We're going to have 2 grills. I haven't used the grill since then, but we're going to have 2 grills. So anything that you can double up in that case and keep separate, don't forget things like linens, tea towels. If you wipe a cutting board that bread was cut on with a tea towel, the person who has a gluten intolerance can't use that tea towel that day until it's washed. So you might want to keep separate towels and things like that. Never share or double dip. We often go out to this Mediterranean restaurant for dinner during the week, and I always order hummus, which is like a chickpea dip. And my husband, of course, is able to eat the pita breads that come because they're made with meat. I don't eat the pita bread. So one day we're sitting there having our appetizers, and he wasn't even thinking. He took his pita, he dipped it into my hummus. Oh well, that was the end of the hummus for me, right? I can't eat it if the regular wheat bread has gone into it. So now what I do is I'll spoon off some hummus onto his plate for him before we even start eating, and then he can have his hummus and I can have my hummus, and I don't have to worry that there's any interaction there between our 2 kinds of food. Whole foods are always the best way to go because if it only has one ingredient, you know what's in it. Apple is an apple. Lettuce is just lettuce. Think of this situation where you have sort of 2 different diets coexisting, cohabiting in one home. I think of it as if you think of yourself in terms of a college student, that's a good way to ensure that you don't have cross-contamination. Because when I was in college, I went to visit my friends who were sharing a house. There were 4 of them sharing a house. And I remember I opened the refrigerator, and there were 4 cartons of milk, and each one had a label with somebody's name on it, right? Because they made absolutely sure they didn't eat each other's food because they would have had to pay for it. So if you think in terms of poor college students, how they keep everything so perfectly separate, that will work in this kind of household where you keep everything apart from each other. So that's within the home. If you move into into the public realm, you're going to be invited to people's houses. You still want to go out to restaurants. You still want to go on vacation. So there are different things that you can do in those situations as well. This is an image of what I call kale salad fully loaded. It's a recipe that I often bring to people's houses when I'm invited because it's just so adaptable, and as you can see, it's really pretty and it always goes over really well. So that's just something that you think about when you're invited to people's houses, that you can bring food with you. The first thing to do is talk to the hostess or the host at the party. If it's a potluck, that's great. Even if it's not, if it's a dinner party, the first thing I say to them, if they don't already know, by now most of my friends know my food restrictions, but if they don't, I would tell them just in a really non-confrontational, polite way that there are certain things I can't eat, and I wonder if it would be possible to cook some dishes, or what can I bring? That's always the first question out of my mouth, what can I bring? Because they will appreciate not having to do as much work, and you will then have something that you can eat. So bringing your own is always number one for me. We probably all know the tip about eating a little bit before you go to a party, just in case. There's nothing there for you to eat. But I also always bring something, so I know I have something that I can enjoy while I'm there. And depending on the kind of party, if it's a small dinner party for 6 people, I'll bring enough for everyone. If it's, say, a potluck or a large party, I'll try to bring enough for 8 to 10 people, so that I'm not the only one eating my food. And there are a couple of reasons for that. When I first had to change my diet, and I was going to friends' houses that I'd been to so many times before, and I wanted to bring something I could eat, and I didn't want to interfere with the festivities, I would just bring like a small serving for myself. And what ended up inevitably happening was somebody would say, hey, what is that? That looks interesting. Can I try some of that? And the first couple of times, I didn't get to eat because everyone else was trying the dish I brought. So now I always bring enough for everyone if I can. And also, you might try to serve yourself first. I have a friend, Andrea Nakayama, who's a functional nutritionist in Portland, and a brilliant nutritionist. So what she suggests is to sweeten the deal. She says you should bring 1 savory dish and 1 sweet dish if you can, if you have the time. So that way, you ensure that you are never that person standing off in a corner who is not eating while everybody else is enjoying the meal, right, at a potluck or a party. If all else fails, keep your mouth shut. I mean this literally and figuratively. If, despite your best efforts, and you've asked the hostess about it, you can serve yourself first. If you know that they're going to have other kinds of foods there. I have a friend who brings paper plates and plastic utensils for her son because he's highly allergic. So they just bring their own food and put it on the paper plate and the plastic plate first. If you've done all that, at potlucks you can ask them to have place cards with all the ingredients for each dish in front of them. Let's say you've done all that and you still find when you get there, for whatever reason, best efforts of the host or hostess, there's really nothing else besides your own dish that you can eat. I don't think it behooves anyone to recommend the person in front of the party during the party. Now, again, if you have a situation where someone's going to go into anaphylactic shock and they can't eat anything, you want to speak to that host or hostess later. But during the party, I would just not say anything. Worst came to worst, I wouldn't eat that much at that party. I'd go home and eat dinner later. It's not going to kill me if I don't eat for 1 evening. The other way I mean keep your mouth shut is literally don't eat that stuff. If there's any doubt whatsoever, don't eat it because you don't want to create that kind of situation at a public gathering. So that's just the best way out of a potentially not great situation. I have found in my experience, I've actually never encountered a situation where people are not willing to bend over backwards to try to accommodate people with special diets. And we've had, the ideal would be I was invited to dinner and my host made sure that the entire meal was gluten-free and vegan because he knew that I was gluten-free and vegan. That's ideal, that's wonderful, but most people really want to help, it's just that they don't know what it entails. So you can help them by bringing a dish or by explaining it to them in a little more detail. It's a slightly different situation when you want to go out to eat at a restaurant. And for people who are newly diagnosed, it can feel, when I was first with my husband, because we don't have kids, we would eat in restaurants, this is way back in the good old days, we would eat in restaurants like 4 times a week. Now we do it a lot less, and partly it's because of my diet. So there are still ways to eat in restaurants, and you will find those 4 or 5 restaurants that you love and that you can eat in. But the first thing to do is to seek upscale establishments. And the reason I say that is the places that are a little more expensive, not only are they probably going to be more willing to accommodate you because they want to serve the customer better, but in a place that's a more upscale restaurant, they tend to make things from scratch à la minute. So they don't have a big pot of pasta waiting that they put out on the plates for everybody the way they do in the Olive Garden. They will make each individual pasta from scratch. So it's easier for them to accommodate you. If you say, can you leave out the peppers? Well, it's not pre-mixed. They don't have to pick out the peppers. They just don't put them in at all. So what it means for us is we don't eat out as often, but when we do, we go to places that cost us a little bit more. And so it evens out in terms of the cost. Go straight to the top. You want to go right up and speak to the manager or the head chef when you inquire about a gluten-free or an allergen-friendly meal, because those are the people who have the power to change what goes on your plate. The waiter isn't going to be as able to make those changes. And I would say, I'm channeling Tony Orlando and Dawn here, if anybody remembers that song. What is it, knock 3 times on the ceiling? To ask 3 times. The first one is before you even get there. You want to call the restaurant and explain your situation, explain what your dietary restrictions are, and see if they are willing to accommodate you and if they can accommodate you. Sometimes the negotiation ends right there, right? So sometimes they can't. The second time is when you arrive and you speak to the host or the wait staff and you place your order. You want to remind them that you're the person who called earlier and there's a special meal waiting for you, or there's a special accommodation that's going to be made for you. And then I would still suggest asking one more time right before you put that food in your mouth, because you just never know. My husband and I went out to dinner about a month ago to an Italian restaurant in our neighborhood. We live in an Italian part of town. And one of my friends recommended this great place that serves gluten-free pasta. So I did. I called first. They said, oh yes, no problem, gluten-free pasta. I spoke when I placed my order. I spent a long time talking to the waiter about, you know, the pasta sauce. Do they use meat? Do they use chicken broth? Whatever. It was vegan, gluten-free pasta. Placed my order, and then the dish arrived, and just something about it. I thought that doesn't look like gluten-free spaghetti to me. It just doesn't look like gluten-free spaghetti. So I said to the waiter, "Are you sure this is gluten-free?" And his face just went white, and he grabbed the plate and said, "Oh my God, I forgot to order the gluten-free pasta." And so he grabbed it away from me and replaced my order. Of course, by the time my dinner came, my husband was finished his dinner, right? Because we had to recook the pasta. But at least I didn't eat gluten-free pasta. So it's really imperative that you are your best advocate, and you're the one. It's really incumbent upon you as the person who's putting this food in your mouth to make sure that you can eat it. So I'm going to say this again later. Never assume anything. Make sure you ask. And I'm not sure to go back to that restaurant, but we have other restaurants where I know that what I'm getting is indeed gluten-free. A couple of other things you can do to ensure a happy experience. Don't arrive on time. And by that I don't mean make a reservation and don't arrive for the reservation. What I mean is try to go extra early or extra late. Because if you arrive during the rush, they're going to be the least able to accommodate you. They're going to be distracted, and all kinds of other customers. It's going to be more difficult for them to accommodate a special diet. But if you go a little bit early when they're not busy, or a little bit later when they're not as busy, they will be able to accommodate you. And then finally, a couple more things. Stay simple and stick to the menu. If there's something on there that can be easily adapted for you, please just make the salad without the cheese. That's a great idea. It makes it easier for them and easier for you, and they will love you for that. And then finally, once you're done, always thank them profusely and give them a goodie. That's partly also because they will remember you and they will be much more inclined to give you good service next time, or anyone else who has a special diet who goes to that restaurant will get good service next time. So that's a little bit about restaurants. And then finally, I want to just take a look at when you travel, because that can be really difficult too. You know, I travel, I stay in hotels, and you find restaurants on the road and so on. So one of the things, this picture is, I call it coconut brittle. It's kind of like a sweet cracker that I take with me whenever I travel, so that I have something on the road. And when I travel, and I'm sure some of you have this experience, you feel like you're bringing one suitcase of clothing and one suitcase of food. But that's what you gotta do, and that's just life on the road. So the first thing you can do, I'm calling it keep it homey. If you can find an efficiency hotel room where you have a stove and a fridge, a place that you can do a little bit of cooking, that's a great way to counterbalance eating at the restaurants and ensure that you can bring your food with you. And I always do. I always ask for a small bar fridge or a fridge in my room if I can. Bring your own, as I said. I have certain dishes that I always bring with me. I have a recipe, for instance, you can just mix it up dry. I call it no-cook porridge. It's a grain-free porridge. I bring it in Ziploc bags, and almost every hotel room has a coffee maker now. I pour in the boiling water, I stir it up in a bowl or in a paper cup, whatever I happen to have, and I've got porridge that I can eat in the morning. Things like that coconut brittle, and that recipe is on my blog as well, by the way. It's dry, it's been baked, so it can keep for weeks. I can bring it with me, and I don't have to worry that it's going to go bad. You can bring things like Tetra Packs of almond milk or soy milk, the small ones. One of the great tips that I heard is to bring dry protein powder, like rice protein powder that you would normally mix in a smoothie to boost up your protein. Just bring the dry powder. In a real pinch, you mix it with water and use that instead of milk with your cereal or with your coffee. I have friends who bring utensils with them on the road, things like hand blenders, so that they can make smoothies on the road. So you improvise and you learn as you go, but bringing as much as you can is really, really useful. If you're going to be driving somewhere and you want to do your research so that you know you have places to go on the road, at least a couple, and that will help to supplement what you bring. The first time my husband and I went to visit New York, we went for a short visit, I will never forget, and I will never do this again. So we had to be at the airport at 6 because our flight left at 8. We thought we would land around 10 and we would drive to the city around 11 and then I'd be able to have lunch. Well, our flight was delayed leaving Toronto. We were held up landing in LaGuardia. Then we couldn't get a shuttle once we were there. It took us a really long time to check in. It ended up being 6 p.m. before I could eat anything, before we could get to a restaurant, because there was nothing in the airport I could eat. So from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., all I had was water. And let me tell you, I was not in a good mood when we sat down in that restaurant. So had I done my research, I would have brought more food with me. I would have brought something with me. And now I always do. Again, same as with restaurants. If you're going to stay at a particular hotel and you're hoping to eat there, or even hoping to eat near there, you can ask them what's around, you can call the restaurant. There's so many great websites for searching for allergen-friendly food now. And again, that's nothing. So those are just some tips for things that you can do in your home, restaurants, and abroad. So I hope that you found some useful tips there, and I would love to answer some questions for you. This is my, you can certainly email me at any time, and that's my blog, ricki.com, and I'm on Twitter as well. Would love you to follow me. But as I said, I'm going to be over there at the table after the talk, and certainly I think we have some time now.